Have you ever thought about how a single storm could actually change the world? I'm not just talking about knocking down some buildings. I mean fundamentally changing the way we think, the way we build our cities, even how we govern. And hey, this isn't some what-if scenario. It has happened more than once. So you're probably wondering, okay, which storm was it? Some crazy hurricane we've all forgotten about, a massive typhoon, that legendary tornado you hear stories about? Well, the truth is, it's not that simple. It wasn't just one storm. And the real story, the part that really matters, is what happens after all that wind and rain finally stops. You see, the answer isn't a single event, but a specific kind of event. We call them atmospheric pivot points. Kind of sounds technical, but it just means these were catastrophic storms that ended up being the silent architects of the world we live in today. So what does it actually mean, atmospheric pivot point? It's basically a storm so bad, so catastrophic, that it does way more than just cause destruction. It's like a break in the timeline. It forces an entire society to stop and completely rethink everything, their science, their engineering, how they even see the world. It literally pivots them from one way of thinking to a totally new one. All right, so let's jump into our first example. We're heading to Great Britain way back to 1703. Now, you got to remember, this is the dawn of the Enlightenment, right? All these new rational ideas are bubbling up. But when it came to the weather, most people still just thought it was an act of God. Well, that was all about to change, big time. And this is where you can really see that shift happen. On one side, you've got the old way of thinking. The Queen literally declared a national day of fasting. Why? To make up for the crying sins of this nation. But on the other side, something totally new is happening. You've got guys like William Derham. He wasn't just praying, no, he was measuring. He actually recorded the barometric pressure at 973 millibars. That's a huge step. It's the very beginning of moving away from superstition and towards actual science. I mean, you have to understand the scale of this thing was just insane, almost impossible to wrap your head around. And the writer Daniel Defoe, the Robinson Crusoe guy, he totally understood this. He knew this wasn't just another bad storm. It was a massive national event, and it needed to be documented in a totally new way. And here it is. This is the pivot. What did Defoe do? He put ads in the newspapers. He basically asked people, hey, send me your stories. And he got hundreds of them. Accounts of everything you can imagine. Shipwrecks, even cows getting lifted into the air. And when he put all these eyewitness stories together in his book, The Storm, he wasn't just telling a tale. He was creating the world's first national weather report. Just think about that for a second. A storm gave birth to modern data-driven journalism. It completely changed how we gather and share information forever. Okay, let's jump forward in time. Way forward. Almost 200 years to be exact, to Galveston, Texas in the year 1900. Now this story, it's about a city's pride, absolute devastation, and honestly, one of the most incredible feats of engineering you will ever hear about. So, on September 8th, 1900, a monster hurricane just slammed into Galveston, which at the time was a really wealthy, booming port city. The human cost was staggering. Somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 people died. Let that sink in. To this very day, it is still the single deadliest natural disaster in all of U.S. history. And a huge part of this tragedy, honestly, was a massive failure in forecasting. Yet the U.S. Weather Bureau, way over in Washington, D.C., and they were pretty rigid. They were convinced the storm was going to Florida. So by the time the local guy, a meteorologist named Isaac Klein, got the right info and hoisted the hurricane warning flags, it was just too late. There was no time to get everyone off the island city. And here's the kicker, the thing that made it so deadly. The highest point in all of Galveston was only about 8.5 feet above sea level. But the storm surge, it was nearly double that, almost 16 feet high. The city just didn't stand a chance. It was gone, wiped clean off the map. But what happened next is the real pivot. Instead of just giving up and abandoning the island, the survivors did something that sounds impossible. They engineered a straight-up miracle. First, they totally changed their government to make rebuilding faster. Then, they built a massive concrete seawall. And, this is the crazy part, they raised the entire city. I'm serious. They physically lifted over 2,000 buildings and pumped in sand to raise the ground level, in some places by 17 feet. It's an incredible story of a city pivoting from total vulnerability to engineered survival. Okay, for our last example, we're talking about a true monster, a complete freak of nature, the tri-state tornado of 1925. This thing wasn't just destructive, it was a scientific mystery. It broke all the rules and completely baffled meteorologists, forcing them to basically invent a whole new science to understand. Just look at this map for a second. That red line, that's its path. For 3.5 straight hours, this thing carved a continuous path of absolute destruction across 3 states, Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. Meteorologists at the time had never seen anything like it. And you know what? We really haven't seen anything quite like it since. It stayed on the ground for 219 miles. That is by far the longest path ever recorded for a tornado. And it was moving so fast, sometimes over 70 miles per hour. People had practically zero time to react. In the end, it killed 695 people, making it the deadliest single tornado in American history, period. And this right here, this is why it was such a pivot point for science. Even today, with all our fancy technology, a major study in 2013 basically concluded we're still not entirely sure what made it so extreme. There's no single obvious answer. This storm was so off the charts, so beyond what anyone thought was possible, that it forced scientists to come up with new theories for everything. Supercells, how these violent, long-lasting tornadoes can even form. It rewrote the book. You know, the numbers are so big it's hard to even imagine. But then you hear the personal stories. There was a little boy, Wallace Ocken, just 2 years old. He was at home when the tornado just picked his house up, lifted the whole thing into the air, and then dropped it on a pile of other collapsed buildings. He and his mom somehow survived. It just goes to show you the unbelievable power we're talking about and how survival was just random chance. Okay, so we've looked at 3 completely different storms, separated by centuries. What's the takeaway here? What's the thread that connects them all? It's this. Each storm was a catalyst for massive change. The Great Storm of 1703, it pivoted society from just praying about the weather to actually reporting on it with data. The Galveston hurricane, it pivoted an entire city from just accepting fate to engineering its own survival. And the tri-state tornado, it pivoted science from just watching the sky to deeply understanding the violent forces within it. They really were the silent architects of the world we know. And all of this brings us to a final, pretty urgent question for today. We all know our climate is changing. Storms are getting stronger, they're happening more often, and if there's one thing these forgotten storms teach us, it's that huge progress often comes right after a huge catastrophe. So it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's our next pivot point? And is it waiting for us just around the corner?